Hello Luca, this is a test video for your 92 to 94 LS400 1UZ non-VVTi harness. This one is built for use with the automatic gearbox from the LS400. So you have obviously all your gearbox wiring which is coming off the back here. Okay, so obviously as you can see, all brand new bolts, all covered in the Raychem heat shrink. There's the plug for your igniters, T-piece for the back here, obviously going around to the other side, all your injectors, etc. Everything is labeled, so it should be relatively straightforward to put it all on. Okay, so just using our 3Z motor to test it all out. So you'll see we've got coils hooked up to a spark plug, so we can see we've got spark. We're going to be plugging all the injectors in so you can hear them working. We've got a, well, it's actually an EGR valve, but it does the job. It shows that the idle control valve motor is moving up and down as it should do. We're going to be force feeding an RPM signal in to obviously replicate the signal so we can get the injectors and coils to fire as well for you. Okay, so that's that side done. So we do have obviously a list of things we're going to test. So we're going to start off with the charge light. So that's going to be testing from the engine harness to the customer plug, make sure that is correct. And it's going to be charge light, oil pressure, gauge temps, that's for your actual vehicle gauge temperature. And then we're going to talk about the fuel pump relay and how that works. We're going to test the starter circuit, because you've actually got your starter harness, your sub harness wired into this, connected to the starter motor, so we can actually crank it over, just so we know that works. Then we'll go and force feed the RPM signal. That's going to then give us a tacho signal. That's why we've got this dash over here. And then obviously we'll test the injectors, the coils, the idle air control valve will move up and down as the RPM, as we sort of connect and disconnect it. And then lastly, we'll go through the trouble codes and how you read them from your fuse box setup. All right. So first thing I'm going to do with you quickly is I'm just going to go through the connector plug. Obviously you've had a harness before, so this will obviously be, a lot of it might be stuff you already know. But essentially you've got red with the blue wires, two thick 14 gauge wires. That's your main power supply in. That is a permanent 12 volts, not an ignition source 12 volts. Then you've got your black with your red, that's your ignition source. And then you've got your gray, and that's your power for your fuel pump. So your fuel pump is obviously relayed in here. Same with your starter relays here. All right, then you've got black with the yellow, and that's your starter wire, so that's going to need 12 volts. So you'll see when we crank it, I'm going to give that 12 volts. Then you've got your yellow with the black, now that's your oil pressure switch. You've got your pink with the purple, that is your alternator light. You've got your yellow with the green tracer, that's for your gauge temp. Then we've got the white with the black. Now that is a brake switch, so that requires 12 volts. Just tap that into wherever your brake lights get a feed from. Then we've got yellow, which is the tacho feed, and you see that's connected to our dash, so that's when we're going to get our signal through. And yellow with the red, that's your check engine light. So again, we've got it connected to the dash, and we'll actually be able to see in the top corner there the check engine light. All right, now because yours is an auto, you've got a secondary plug, and this is for all the gearbox stuff. So I'm just going to go through the colors here. It'll be in your welcome pack, but it's just a nice little reference for me now. So you've got park, which is black and red. You've got reverse, which is red and blue. Neutral, which is red and yellow. Drive, which is blue and red. 2, which is white and blue. Low, with is orange. And then you've got for your kickdown switch, which is red. You've got your PWR signal, or your power mode for your transmission, that's in yellow. And on the earlier models, you actually had a 3-wire Hall effect speed sensor at the back of your gearbox. So we've power and grounded it inside the harness, so we just feed the speed signal through for you, and that's the black and yellow. So that's to do with all of these plugs here. So you can use these either to light up a dash if you've got park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2L, etc. Those will give out 12 volts for that. Obviously your reverse, you'll need for your reverse lights, and the rest is just for indication. Kickdown, you'll put a switch in, and the PWR mode you can fire on a switch as well, and then speed signal. It will be explained in the welcome pack how to connect these, so don't worry about whether you give it a power or earth or so on. It will come in there. All right. We didn't get your ECU, so I'm just using a dummy ECU we have lying around here. That's what we're going to be testing on. So obviously it's obviously not stick it up as it's not your ECU that we're actually testing. Obviously we didn't also get the igniters, so we're just using our igniters. Now for the keen-eyed amongst you, this is a blue sticker igniter, and this is not designed for a 92 to 94. Different keyway, and I've actually grounded off here just so I can fit it on, because it works for our testing purposes. It's just not the right one for the actual vehicle. Okay, so let's start with the first one now. We're going to do the charge light. So we know the charge light is pink and blue. So I've got my multimeter connected to it. We've got it on continuity. We've got it to beep. Right, so I'm going to take them the other side. And there you go. So there's your alternator plug. And it's pin number 1. And there you go. You're beeping. So we're happy with that. Okay. So moving on to the next one, we've got oil pressure. So we're just going to move this over to the yellow with the black. So let's get that in there. Okay. Hopefully that's still biting on there. Looks like it. Right, so we're going to go here. I'll explain why we got a wire in there in a minute, but I'm just going to test that on there. Let's pull that out of the way. Okay, and there you go. Alright, so we're happy with that. Okay, and next up we've got gauge temp. So that's going to be our yellow with a green tracer. Okay. Right, okay. So, as I'm pretty sure yours is going into a Volvo, what we've done is the temp wire, which is a singular wire that we've got here, all right, that's just going to a loose wire, so you can put on whatever sensor is going to work for your dash. All right. Okay, so we're happy with that. Right, so that taken into account, I think we've got there. Right, so we'll move over to the fuel pump relay. So, I do have a video on fuel pump systems in regards to standard management and how they work. So if you want a lot more in-depth information, you can refer to that video. But the 92 to 94 is the only 1UZ LS400 that came with a fuel pump ECU. So to get around that, what we're basically doing is, we're using an old Land Rover trick actually. So your fuel pump relay gets powered from your starter relay so that the fuel pump runs when you're cranking the vehicle, all right? And then what happens is the other trigger is from your oil pressure, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put the ignition on so you can actually see. And what I'm gonna do is, I'm going to put our probe onto our gray wire here. Okay, so the gray, this is now the power supply for the fuel pump, all right? I'm gonna take this and put it on the negative of the battery. Let's go over to voltage. Okay, so you can see at the moment we've got nothing. Well, actually, let me swap it around, otherwise you're gonna get a negative voltage here. Okay, let's put that over there. Okay, I'm going to put this onto the negative. Sorry. Okay, so we've obviously got no ignition on, we've got no check engine on and so on, so I'm just going to turn the ignition on. So give me a second. Alright, you probably heard all the relays click in there. So this little LED here, that's our check engine light, so that's obviously lit up. Now we know the ECU and everything is powered up. As you can see on the dash, that's obviously lit up as well. Okay, so we're happy the ECU is on. You'll see we've got 0 voltage on the fuel pump wire. And what I'm going to do is, at the moment I've earthed the oil light out. So that is an indication that it's got no oil pressure. If I remove this, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the relay box. You can actually hear it click. But basically I'm just going to 1, 2, 3, there you go, and 14 volts. So the fuel pump will continue to run as long as you have oil pressure. Oil pressure goes away, light comes on your dash, and it'll actually kill the fuel pump as well. All right. The other way it'll actually work is when you crank it. So that brings us nice and neatly onto our next test, which is going to be the starter circuit. So what I'm going to do is, I've got our yellow with the black one wire here. That's our 12 volts for our starter. So when I touch this, the motor's going to crank over. But before I do that, you'll see on the selector plug here, I've just used a fuse to bridge the park neutral switch. All right. So I have done a video on park neutral switches, how it works and how your actual ECU receives information in terms of what gear it's in. So if you want more information, fire over to that and you can have a good look at that video and it'll explain everything in great detail. Okay. So just to show you, I'm going to remove this fuse. We're going to touch the starter wire and we've got nothing. No cranking whatsoever. So that's the park neutral switch working. So I'm going to use this little fuse to bridge that over. And then in 1, 2, 3. Okay, I don't think I need to tell you, obviously you must have heard that noise in the background, so that's the motor cranking over. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold the camera here on the multimeter, which is still connected to our fuel pump. And you're going to see that as soon as I go to crank it, the fuel pump is going to come alive. And then obviously the oil light going out will keep it running. So 1, 2, 3. Right, so we've mimicked the Toyota system in the sense that it doesn't prime the fuel pump. So don't be scared when you plug everything in, the fuel pump will not prime. All right, they obviously had a system where they kept the fuel running, non-return valve to keep the fuel pressure up overnight. So when you come in the morning to crank it, you would start up relatively straightforward and quickly. Okay, so that's the fuel pump and the starter circuit now complete. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the items that we're going to test by force feeding an RPM signal. So obviously we leave the ignition on. All right, so got a little sort of homemade device here. Now this isn't going to actually give out a proper signal. It's not going to give out a 12-tooth crank trigger and a single tooth cam trigger, but it's enough to get the engine to actually fire the coils and actually fire the injector, so we can just test that they're all working. All right, so at the moment that's all there. So if you give me a second, I'm just going to use the oxygen sensor power supply to get this working. Sorry, very difficult single-handedly doing this. Okay. And you can probably hear the coils already going there. So without shocking myself, there you can see that the coils are sparking. So that's this coil on this bank. And then we've got that coil on that bank. So again, hopefully a little bit of light show there. Right, while I'm here, I'm just going to go through and we're going to do all the injectors. So you should be able to hear it over the spark plugs go in. But we'll just go from there. So we'll start here. So this is number 8, injector 8, and you can hear it there. All right, this is injector 6, and that's going. All right, we're going to move to injector number 4. Yeah, that one going. We're going to move to injector number 2. Okay, and that one's going. Right, let's move our way over to the other side. Right, so starting here, we're going to do injector 7. Okay. We're going to do injector 5. Okay. We're going to do injector 3. Going to come in close. Okay. And then lastly, we've got injector 1. Bring the camera in close again. Okay, so all 8 injectors working just fine. We tested the fuel pump, that works. So what we're going to do now is, I don't know if you noticed, but this little piston that moves up and down is actually fully open. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to put the camera here and try and hold it in place as best I can. That should do. So as I kill the RPM feed, there you go. And as I put the RPM feed back in again, there you go. So we're happy that the idle control valve should work as it should. Obviously going up is closing, so because the RPM signal is much higher, it's going to go from there. And there you go. It's giving an RPM signal to the dash, so we're happy with that, that'll work. So we know the check engine works, we know the RPM works. I've gone through testing from the selector plug to here, so I'm happy with that. I don't want to make a 40-minute video going through and testing every single one. So that's going to be fine. So now I'm just going to kill this feed. Okay. All right, so going down the list, tacho we know works, injectors we know work, all 8 of them, coils we know work, both of them are firing up, idle air control valve we know works. As you can see, it's resting in its fully open position for when you next start. Obviously it'll be open to help you with that. So next thing we're going to do now is we're going to go into trouble codes. So the system we built into the fuse box is that's why I've got the check engine light here. So even if you don't wire up the check engine light there, you can still check codes straight from here. Okay, so you'll see there's an open slot here where it looks like a fuse should go. That's not for a fuse, so don't leave a fuse in there. Okay, so you can take a fuse from here, and you get these are actually in your box lid. Okay, you're going to pull that out. All right, and as I put this in, you're going to see the check engine light go out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it here, and you're going to see the LED turn off. There you go, and start reading codes. So you've got 1, 1, 2, that'll be 12. And you've got 1, 1, 2, 3, that's 13. And you got 1, 2, and 1, 21. That's because oxygen sensors aren't plugged in. And you got 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's 24, which is intake air temperature. So I'm not going to go through all of the codes, but that's basically how you do it. Okay. So once you take it out, it'll obviously go back to just being fully lit as in a normal ignition on position with the engine not running. All right. So just another useful tip for you in terms of the diagnostic mode that you can put the vehicle in. What it'll also do for you as well is it'll lock timing at 10 degrees. So some people might find that useful. If you think your engine has slipped a tooth on the cam and you've got a timing light lying around, super easy. Just bridge that terminal, start the vehicle, it'll lock at 10 degrees, and fingers crossed if it's not completely dark. No, it is completely dark. Right, okay. So anyway, your crank wheel here, just above it, you've got timing marks 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. All right, so you can very easily and quickly check cylinder 1, timing light, put it in diagnostic mode. You should see 10 degrees of timing while she's running. So that's another easy way to check before having to pull the covers off and actually looking at your timing marks, etc. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we're happy with everything. The charge light works, or it comes through to there. The oil pressure, the gauge temp, the fuel pump relay, I hope you're happy with how that works. The starter circuit we've tested okay. Tacho, injectors, coils, idle air control valve, and you have a good idea on the trouble codes. So just remember with the trouble codes, our welcome packs do come with a listing for you so that you can actually check and see what those codes are. Okay, so from my point of view, it's just literally let's get this all packed up and get it off to you. And I hope this has been helpful. And for everybody else, thanks for watching. Cheers, bye-bye.